Resuming debate, the honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I start, I want to say that I'm splitting my time with the great member for Charlesbourg, Holt, St. Charles. Madam Speaker, whether you're an immigrant to this country like myself, or you've lived here your whole life, it's really hard not to feel like Canada is not the same Canada anymore. It feels more broken than it has ever felt after 9 years of this Liberal NDP government. It's hard not to walk down the street of one of our major cities and see tents everywhere, or to see the crime, chaos, and disorder. Walk by a business that has a for lease or for sale sign because they've went insolvent. When you look around and you hear stories all the time about how mothers are having to put back groceries on the shelves just because they can't decide whether they can afford it or not, or they're buying less nutritious food. Or you talk to those moms or other seniors who are having to find other options because rent has gone up, mortgages have doubled as well. And now we're hearing stories about students living under bridges. We're hearing about nurses and teachers who have good jobs, but after 9 years of this government are having to live in their car because they cannot afford housing. It's harder and harder for people to eat, heat, and house for themselves after 9 years of this government. There's high interest rates that were driven up by this government's deficits. Once again last week, those Canadians looking for any kind of relief when it comes to housing received none. There is no hope at the end of that tunnel because the government, the Bank of Canada, once again had to hold the rates higher for longer. It's those rates staying higher for longer why builders aren't building, buyers aren't buying, developers aren't developing. You know, this country used to be one where if you put in hard work, you would be able to get something out of it. The member previous to me spoke about personal experience. We moved here as immigrants. We didn't come here with much. I was considered an at-risk youth. We went through really harsh poverty. In fact, me and my family used to stand in line for low-income bus passes. But there was a promise that was kept in Canada back then. Something we called the Canadian dream, where if you put in the work, you put in hard work, you would be able to see the fruits of your own labor. But today, after 9 years of this government, more and more families, Canadian dream is turned into a nightmare. Those that are moving here say this is not the Canada that was promised to us, where you would be able to own a business, own a house, be able to have affordable groceries or an affordable place to live. And those people that live here their whole life are saying, what are we doing here? This place just does not feel like the same Canada anymore. And it's because after 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, life has never been that much more miserable and more expensive. But how did we get here? This Prime Minister, who, after saying that budgets balance themselves, delivered 8 inflationary budgets that drove up inflation at 40-year highs, and Canadians saw the most rapid and aggressive interest rate hikes not seen in Canadian history. He slammed a carbon tax scam onto Canadians, making the cost of everything even more expensive. And just recently this month, when 70% of Canadians were telling him, spike the hike, do not go ahead with this carbon tax increase, he still increased the carbon tax scam by 23%. And just now, the government's own parliamentary budgeting officer once again confirmed that what he said before the carbon tax increase was more families, a majority of families, are going to be worse off with this carbon tax scam when you factor in economic and fiscal impacts than what you get back in these so-called rebates. And he confirmed once again that after the hike on April the 1st, they're still worse off. So the misinformation that's coming from this government, what they don't understand is the pain, the real pain that all of these bad policies have caused on Canadians, why Canadians feel like this is not the same Canada anymore. The dream, the promise of Canada is gone. Just this year alone, Madam Speaker, this Liberal NDP government will force taxpayers, the Canadian taxpayers, to pay more into this Liberal NDP Prime Minister's interest on the debt he accumulated than what goes to healthcare or national defense. Can you believe that? $54 billion is going to go to bankers, bondholders, and this Prime Minister's Bay Street buddies, rather than going into doctors, nurses, and hospitals. That's 9 years of this Liberal NDP government. And there is no relief, because on his way to quadruple the carbon tax scam, he increased the carbon tax 23%, and we instantly saw all across the country what that did when people were filling up their gas in their tanks or when they went to the grocery stores. There is nothing also on top of that to address the productivity issue. The Deputy Governor of the Bank of Canada, Carolyn Rogers, recently said, Canada's productivity is in a break glass emergency. Madam Speaker, for the Bank of Canada to say that, it should ring off alarm bells. In fact, when the Bank of Canada is saying that it's raining, there's probably a thunderstorm or a tornado coming. And that's after 9 years of this government. And it's not just Conservatives or the Bank of Canada saying it. Liberals are calling out other Liberals about this budget. In fact, a proud Liberal, former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge said this is going to be the worst budget since 1982. And it's because Canada is in a productivity crisis that was created by this government when they drove out investment. In fact, they drove out more than $260 billion worth of investment out of Canada since 2016 because of their failed policies, anti-energy, anti-Canada, anti-Alberta, anti-resources agenda. This woke agenda is the reason why people are not investing in Canada and people are leaving Canada. They're leaving everything on the table here and just leaving. It's because they don't see any reason to invest. There's more tax burden. There is a lot more red tape and regulation here than anywhere else, even though Canada has some of the best standards when it comes to environmental standards and human rights standards. Yet this anti-energy, anti-business government continues to drive more and more of our powerful paychecks outside to dirty dictators and other places when it should be here for our people. Canada is in that bad of a situation when it comes to productivity. Canada has the worst economic growth in all of the OECD countries. In fact, our GDP per capita or per person, or what we consider how each Canadian is determined to be successful in this country, is worse today than it was in 2018. That means Canadians are poorer. And it's clear to see. When 2 million Canadians are in a food bank in a single month, and 1 million more projected to this year, like I said, students living under bridges, nurses and teachers living in their cars, that is the Canada after 9 years of this Liberal NDP Prime Minister. And this budget does absolutely nothing but pour another $40 billion of inflationary fuel on the fire that this government started. Higher deficits, higher taxes, more pain, more suffering for Canadians. But Madam Speaker, it wasn't like this before this Liberal NDP Prime Minister, and it won't be like this after he's gone. He is not worth the cost, and what Canada is going to see after the next election, the next carbon tax election, is they're going to see a common-sense Conservative government that's going to axe a tax to bring down the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating. It's also going to knock off a huge chunk of the inflation we see today, which means interest rates can come down at a faster rate. Common-sense Conservatives are going to build homes, not more bureaucracy like we've seen after 9 years of this government, who pumped in $89 billion of inflationary spending to only double housing costs, to double rents and mortgages. A common-sense Conservative government will incentivize municipalities to increase their permits by 15% so they can build, build, build. We're going to fix the budget. We're going to bring in a dollar-for-dollar law so that interest rates and inflation can come down and Canadians don't have to lose their home, and work work responsibly with taxpayers' dollars and not throw it away like this government. And we're going to stop the crime, chaos, and disorder we see in this country. We need to help our loved ones get back on their feet through recovery and not through more drugs. We're going to bring it home for Canadian people and restore the Canadian dream that this great country used to have. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Louis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the facts seem to contradict what the honourable member is saying. Canada is one of the top countries for attracting direct foreign investment. In fact, it's the top country per capita in attracting direct foreign investment. But I will admit that there are pressures. There are pressures on capital in Canada to go to the United States, specifically in green industries, and that pressure is caused by a $400 billion Inflation Reduction Act in the U.S. Does the honourable member think we need to spend much more on green technology in this country to counterbalance that attraction that is coming from the United States?
Honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
The first thing we need to do is get this anti-energy entity resource government out of the way and replace it with a common sense Conservative government that will green light green projects. Projects where when Germany, Greece, and Japan, who recently came to Canada begging for our LNG, we should have been the leaders in that and been able to provide that, to not only bring powerful paychecks to our Canadian people, but replace dirty dictator oil around the world. And another great way to lower global emissions is to replace that dirty dictator oil with clean, green, low-carbon Canadian energy that we can be proud of, that brings powerful paychecks to our people and a better economy that will help fix the productivity issue, because after 9 years of this government, Canada doesn't look like it's open for business anymore.
The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Thank you very much, and I would like to thank my colleague for his intervention today. You know, one of the things that always amazes me, he's from Alberta, as I am, and he will know that right now the wildfire season is already underway in Alberta, that it started in February this year, which is unbelievable and unprecedented. We're hearing from farmers in southern Alberta who are selling their herds because they can't afford to feed because of the multi-year drought that we're experiencing. And so when I hear a member from Alberta never want to talk about those issues, I think of my two children. I think of the fact that I want them to live in my province. I want them to stay in Alberta and have good forward-facing jobs, but yet he has no plan for dealing with the climate crisis. There's no interest in even talking about the fact that farmers, that Albertans are dealing with a climate emergency right now. We're going to have climate refugees in Alberta this year when the forest fire season makes it impossible for people to breathe. And they have no plan for that. None. I have no trust that if they were to ever make government, that they would make any efforts to protect our environment.
The honourable member, it is questions and comments, so members can make comments. The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Geez, I wonder if that member could only do something about it being in the government right now. What she should be doing is...
The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona, and I think the honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn knows better.
I would encourage the member to withdraw that comment because he knows that it's not true, and I would not want him to be accused of lying within the House.
The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn knows that that is not true, and I would ask him to withdraw the comment, please.
If only that member would stop propping up this corrupt, inept...
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Madam Speaker, I would ask for the member to withdraw unequivocally.
As you instructed?
Well, yes, the honourable member, before changing the way he's introducing his remarks, can the honourable member please withdraw the comment to begin with?
Speaker, just for clarification, can you tell me a little bit of reason of why I need to do that? I just would like to know.
It's not factually true.
It's inappropriate.
It's not factually true.
I withdraw that part of my statement unequivocally, but I will say for that member to stand up here to continue to prop up this government that's driven more Canadians into food banks than ever before, and she has the gall to talk about farmers when she completely supports almost in putting our farmers into bankruptcy and not helping Bill C 2, 3, 4 pass in its original form so we can bring down the cost of gas for groceries. It'll help reduce costs for our hardworking farmers, yet they go on this attack on our farmers always and are okay with the cost of everything going up. They continue to prop them up. I think that member needs to stop protecting her leader's pension and propping up this corrupt prime minister. It's time to get out of the way, go to a carbon tax election so Canadians and especially Albertans can tell her and her government where they stand on the carbon tax, because after the next carbon tax election, Canadians are going to scrap this prime minister and that NDP government.
A very brief question from the honourable member for Owen Gray, Bruce.
Bruce Gray, Owen Sound. Thanks, Madam Speaker. Look, I just have a quick question for my honourable colleague. You know, something that bothers me and I know a lot of my constituents is just how much debt we're paying, or interest we're paying on the national debt. He talked about it's more money going to service the debt than actual going into healthcare, but he mentioned the military as well. And I'd just like to elaborate or ask his opinion on the importance of supporting our military here in Canada, especially considering how volatile the world is and this lack of commitment by the current government to getting us to our international commitments, in particular NATO, and just how much that bothers so many Canadians and our allies.
Very brief answer from the honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
I want to thank
15 seconds.
I want to thank that member for his service and the great work he does in here. Might be a slightly better hockey player than me, but I want to agree with him that it just goes to show that under this Prime Minister after 9 years, Canada has become a joke and not become serious, not only just within our allies, but on the world stage. We need to restore the responsibility of a common sense conservative leader.
And time is up.